At the age of 24, I am terrified of death. The idea of dying looms over me, and I'm scared to think that someday everything that is just won't be. But there was a point in my life where the idea of the end wasn't scary. It sounded like a relief. In ninth grade, I was at my absolute lowest. Swallowed by a feeling so hollow, it felt like I was at the bottom of the ocean, alone, grasping for air. I lost the will to live. I was merely existing. But then I found a distraction from these feelings, and it came from a video game about high school kids who shoot themselves in the head to summon manifestations of their psyche. It sounds bizarre, I know, but that's the story I have to tell you today. So let me paint a picture of what my life was like back then. I lived in Syria, a war-torn country run by a tyrant. If that wasn't enough, I also lived in a lower-class household haunted by another tyrant, my father. Day-to-day life felt like trying my hardest to breathe in a stranglehold. In Syria, the oppressive regime designed a system to keep the everyday person in constant suffering and worry. We had to fight, beg, and plan our days around basic human needs. In the countryside where I lived, I would be lucky if I saw electricity for 2 hours a day. We would have to plan our days, our lives, around these 2 hours. Get ready, make sure everything's set. In those 2 hours, we have to charge our phones, charge our flashlights, decide who needs most to take a shower. That is if we had water. Water would also be cut off for days on end, until it came back for 2 or 3 hours a day, once a week. It's not just electricity and water that were used to keep us in a cycle of chaos. It was gas for the stove, oil for cooking, fuel for cars, food for the table. It wasn't out of the usual to go weeks without one or more of these basic human rights, after which the regime would announce a shortage or crisis and hike prices up. With every day it became worse. Basic needs became commodities only those at the top could afford. Every day there were more hoops to jump through, more so-called officials to bribe, more people starving, more people dying, and there was nothing you or anyone could do about it except pray you weren't next. Until the conditions became so terrible, you'd pray for the opposite. Imagine getting home after school on a cold winter day. You walk through the door and no one's there to greet you, even though the house is full. Everyone's worried about something. What are we gonna eat tomorrow? When will I be able to charge my phone? When will this be over? The house is dark. Electricity hasn't been on for days. Everything is running out of power. All that's left to do is sleep or stare at one of 4 degrading walls. You try to wash your face, but the freezing water is too much to even consider touching it. Otherwise, you could get sick. You can't afford a doctor's visit now. You just sold your Xbox to afford a week of groceries. But at least your dad hadn't pulled anything. So all in all, it was a good day. Speaking of my dad, as if life wasn't difficult enough, he made sure to be a thorn in my side, doing his hardest to ensure we never had a day's peace. In ninth grade, when things in Syria were getting worse by the second, his abuse, physically and emotionally, never let up. When my mother asked for a divorce, he abandoned us. He let go of all responsibility, financially, emotionally, and otherwise, which, as hard as it was an acceptable outcome for us considering we no longer had to put up with him. But his actions and demeanor from there on can only be described as sheer insanity. As my mom and I struggled to make ends meet, he attacked us, pulled a gun out on us, paid people to spy on us. He took us to court multiple times. He even took my elderly grandma to court, a 70-year-old woman who didn't have it in her to hurt a fly. In Syria, there was no law or justice. There was only money and connections. Being a simple family, doing our best to get by, we didn't have the resources to fight back against him. And so we had to put up with his crap for 9 years until we escaped the country. My entire world was built on struggle. Normalcy was out of reach. Every waking moment felt like being engulfed in a grey fog that mutes everything and silences everyone. I had lost the ability to relate to people, lost any connection I had to anyone. Even in the company of friends, it was like I could see and hear them through a thick wall of glass. Looking back at that time in my life, there's this constant feeling of dread and anxiety that never lifted, until I came across this little PSP game you may have heard of called Persona 3. We had to sell a lot to get by, but one thing I had kept until that point was my PSP. I had come across a method to pirate PSP games, so with every possibility open to me, I wanted to play the best of the best before I no longer could. And that just so happened to be Persona. I didn't know a thing about it, other than it was on every best of all time list. And frankly, that was enough. Something to just eat up the time, a black hole to throw all my empty hours into. What surprised me was how much this game made me feel. Something so unlike what I normally felt. The opening was so stylish and moody with this hauntingly beautiful music. The main character, this quiet blue-haired kid, seemed wrapped in his own apathy. There was a loneliness in those first few hours of the game that felt hauntingly familiar. It was like looking in a mirror, and that shared melancholy pulled me right in. Persona 3's whole premise is incredibly dark. Every night, when the clock strikes midnight, a hidden dark hour appears, a secret 25th hour that normal people don't experience. During this hour, the world twists. Most people are frozen inside creepy coffins, and a giant shadowy tower called Tartarus erupts from the ground. Inside, these creatures called shadows roam, feeding on people unable to help themselves. In Persona 3, you and your friends are part of a special group, Seas, and you're the only ones who can move during this hidden hour. The only way to fight these shadows is by summoning a persona, which is basically a manifestation of your inner self. And you do this by using an evoker, which looks exactly like a handgun. You point it at your own head, and you pull the trigger. Not only is the world of Persona in the state of slowly dying, the very act which gives you the ability to fight is a symbolic moment of looking death right in the face and accepting that it is inevitable. It was unsettling to say the least. It still is, but it's absolutely central to what the game is trying to say about depression, loss, fear, death, and life. At first, this darkness just felt like it was validating how bleak I felt. But in Persona, the bleakness has a name and a shape. It was giving me a monster I could actually fight. During the dark hour, instead of hopelessly waiting, I actually had a chance to change things. A lot of games do this. A lot of games give a face and name to otherwise immaterial fears. So what's so special about Persona? Well, outside of the nightly battles, Persona 3 is basically a life simulator. You're a quote-unquote normal high school student. You have to go to class, study for exams, hang out with friends, and maybe even work a part-time job. The whole game runs on a strict calendar, and time is everything. You have to choose every single day how you're gonna spend it. In my real life, days had become this formless gray blur, but in Persona, my days had structure. There was more than fighting for basic needs. It gave me a routine, it gave me small, achievable goals. Should I study tonight and get my academic stat up? Or go to the cafe to be more charming? Should I spend time with a friend and get closer? Or should I grind in Tartarus to get stronger? These little choices gave me a sense of control that I didn't have in my real life. Ticking off those small tasks, reaching those tiny goals, it felt amazing. It sounds so simple, but managing this virtual life started to feel like practice for managing my own. While my world felt like total chaos, the world of Persona 3 made sense. It rewarded my efforts. It was a safe place where I could start to rebuild a sense of purpose, connect to people, and face down my fears. There's a phrase you hear over and over again in Persona 3, Memento mori. It's Latin for remember you will die. When I first heard it, it felt like a sick joke. Death was all I could think about. It was all around me. I didn't need a reminder. But the game's message isn't just about death or dying. It's about the other half of that idea, the part it doesn't say out loud. Memento viver, remember to live. Persona 3 wants you to realize that life is precious because it ends. It wants you to appreciate every day, every connection, every rainy day you spend indoors reading, every sunny day you spend hanging out with friends, every struggle you face, and the people you face it with. The game's whole point is that life has meaning because it ends. It's not about getting over the fear of death. It's about learning to live in spite of it. Because life is all but guaranteed to have pain and loss. Every single character is dealing with some kind of trauma. They grow and get stronger not by ignoring it, but by accepting it and deciding to move forward anyway. This constant confrontation with the idea of dying, with the idea of pain, with the idea of struggling, started to change how I thought about my life. My own passive wish for the end started to feel pointless. The characters in this game were fighting tooth and nail for every single day, for themselves and for the people they love. They weren't afraid of dying, they were afraid of not really living. Their fight became my inspiration, and slowly the question in my head started to change from why bother to what can I do with the time I have left? It was this tiny seed of hope planted right in the middle of my soul. For me, the most powerful part of Persona 3 was its social link system. To get stronger in the game, you don't just fight monsters in a dungeon. You build real relationships with the people around you. Each of these social links is a character with their own story. There's a classmate who feels totally invisible, a student council member crippled by anxiety, an old couple at a bookstore trying to cope with losing their son. And then there's Akinari, a young man you meet who is dying from a terminal illness, trying to find some meaning in a life that is going to be cut unfairly short. To build these relationships, you spend time with people. You listen, you show up for them, you have their back. In the game, this helps you make stronger personas. But for me, it did way more. It taught me in a very real way that connection is strength. When everything inside me was screaming to lock myself away, Persona 3 was screaming at me the exact opposite. It showed me that building bonds and supporting others is how you fight back against despair. Seeing these virtual friendships grow, seeing these characters start to heal because I chose to spend time with them, gave me courage to reach out and accept help in turn. A lot of people write off gaming as just escapism, a way to run from your problems, and for a while, that's what it was for me. But Persona 3 didn't just let me run away. It created a safe place where I could face the exact things I was running from. But this time, I had the tools to deal with them. The game gave me a blueprint for how to live life with a purpose, even when you're suffering. It showed me that the answer to despair isn't to wish it all away, but to build connections and to live as fully as you can in the time you have. That experience changed how I see video games, but more than that, it changed how I see myself. It pulled me out of a very, very dark place, not by making me forget my problems, but by giving me the strength to face them. And when the game eventually ended, I was sad, I was distraught, I cried genuine tears refusing to accept it. I was hit with a feeling of pride for accomplishing our goal and saving the world, but it was overshadowed by a profound sadness over Yuki's death. In time, I came to realize just how perfectly this ending reinforces Persona 3's central themes of remembering the inevitability of death, finding meaning through connections, and accepting the transient beauty of life. So, instead of wishing for the end, I went right back around to fearing it. Not exactly the message of the game, I know, but I don't want to go away before I make the most out of my life. Before I make real connections, before I achieve my goals, before I learn how to appreciate life and make the most of it. Persona 3 didn't magically cure me. That's not how it works. But what the game did do was light a match in the dark, right when I thought the fire was out for good. It gave me a reason to get through one more day, and then the next one, and the next one after that. It taught me a lot about life and death. It gave me a new perspective, that is, learning to appreciate the wild, temporary gift of being alive. And it reminded me that the most powerful thing in the world isn't some great evil like an oppressive tyrant, or a dark force like an abusive father, but the simple, profound act of connecting with other people, like a loving mother who I will appreciate for all of my life. That's a lesson that, for me, was life-saving. And that's how Persona 3 saved my life. My story is just one example of how much a game can matter, and how video games can help us in the most unexpected ways. I'm sure a lot of you have a story like this, whether it's with a game, a book, a movie, or even a song. So I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Is there a piece of art that found you at just the right time and made a real difference in your life? Please share that story if you're comfortable, because you never know who might be reading it and who it might help. Thank you all for watching. You can subscribe if you like this video, and see you next time.